Welcome, everyone, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. This is Fantasy Rain Rundown, my weekly off-season podcast show. My name is Joe Arpasi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008, and after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content on letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. I'd really appreciate it if you guys would help the new Spotify channel grow by leaving a 5-star review. It would definitely go a long way. And you can also follow me on X at UW_purple_rain. And to start today's show off, I will be doing a recap of last week's content. We'll be going over the topic of the day, which is position battles to monitor. And we'll wrap things up with mailbag time, where I answer your submitted questions. Now that I got that basic information out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. For last week, I put out 2 items. I had a Diary of the Draft Man episode for mock drafts, and I also put out my very first player prop spotlight article. For the Diary of a Draft Man episode, I featured the Chasing the Natties mock draft number 6. In that mock draft, I utilized my FBS half PPR draft strategy. I did some tweaks during the draft to allow myself a little more flexibility. So the episode's definitely worth watching. For any of you that have never looked at any of my draft strategy analysis articles, which you can find on the website and in my CFF draft guide, I give you positions that you should look at drafting during certain rounds. And the flexibility that I did in this one is I allowed it to where if it said during rounds 3 through 4, you have to draft these positions, rounds 3 through 5, you have to draft these particular positions, and you're at round 5, it's time to draft a wide receiver, and you don't see the value there at wide receiver. I allowed myself to push that wide receiver back to round 6 and to go after another position instead that I had listed in the rounds 5 through 10. So this is just, 6 through 10. So it was a little bit of flexibility around the edges for where I give my advice, but I definitely think it's a great episode to watch in ways that you can see. As I mentioned in draft strategy analysis, there's no one way to do a draft. I try and give you guys a blueprint that I believe in that's backed by stats. But this was a good way where I could show you how you can tweak that and find a way to make it your own. I was drafting in the number 11 spot, so I included 6 rounds in the preview show instead of the normal 5. And during those 6 rounds, I decided to take a very heavy running back approach. In those first 6 rounds, I drafted 1 quarterback, 4 running backs, and 1 wide receiver. In those first 6 picks, I drafted running back Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame, running back Demond Claiborne, Wake Forest, wide receiver Josh Cameron, Baylor, running back Sire Gaines, Boise State, running back Dylan Smothers, NC State, and quarterback Colton Joseph, Old Dominion. The other item that I put out last week is a brand new article series called Player Prop Spotlight. And this very first one was featuring the Underdog Fantasy preseason props. This is where I review some of the season-long player props and I compare them to my own projections that are included in my 2025 CFF draft guide. And I look for ones that look for props that I feel like are worth mentioning, that either you should take the like the over, the under, or just flat out avoid. I want to also give that advice too, of me thinking like, if I think something's a little risky, if I'm not willing to bet my own money on it, I'd rather tell you guys that thought process and let you guys get to hear that side of things too. But to go over 2 of them here, I'm going to start with one of the props that I really do like. That involves quarterback Cade Klubnik from Clemson, and the prop that Underdog is offering, one of them, and the one that I liked, is 28.5 passing touchdowns on the season. I give a confidence rating with all of these props, and my confidence level for this prop was above average. I projected out 35 passing touchdowns, which I'm going to admit is a little ambitious, but I don't think it's unquestionable here with Klubnik. And because of that projection, my bet suggestion was to take the higher bet. I think the coaching staff is going to shift the play calling to lean on the passing game and help Klubnik's Heisman hopes. I also see that Clemson has one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the country right now. These wide receivers are talented. They can take advantage of one-on-one matchups, and there's no way that a opposing secondary can, get double coverage and take away everybody. So I definitely like the higher vote here for Klubnik. And the last player prop I'll mention here in this review is one that I kind of really do like here. It's wide receiver Cam Coleman from Auburn, and the prop amount is 774.5 receiving yards. My confidence level on this one is very high since my projection came in at about 1,191 receiving yards. This means I'm obviously taking the higher bet here. In the article, I did point out that Coleman had 598 yards last season. That was over 11 games. If you take all games where Coleman had 5 targets or more, which is something that didn't happen until later in the year when the coaches decided to focus on him, you end up seeing that he averaged 88.2 yards per game during those games where he got more than 5 targets. Extrapolate that over a 12-game season, you get 1,058 yards. That's well above the prop amount here of 774.5 yards and even below my projection of 1,191 yards. So I'm really liking this Cam Coleman bet that Underdog is offering and taking the higher on it. I'm going to transition over here to the main topic of the show, which is position battles to monitor. Since we have spring camps starting up this week, I felt it's important to kind of do a little primer, and I wanted to point out a handful of position battles that I'm looking at each position, ones that I feel like might have the most fantasy relevancy for everyone to be watching, where right now maybe you're not looking at targeting some of these guys because you're not exactly sure where the situation is. Maybe you feel confident in a guy, but I just feel like these are definitely worth reviewing. I'm going to start here with the quarterback position. For quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers, I picked out 5 different position battles that I know I'm going to be monitoring as camps open up around the country this week. And I'm just kind of going through them in alphabetical order. They're not ranked or anything. But the first one here for quarterbacks I'm looking at is James Madison. We have Matthew Saluka, Alonzo Barnett, Camden Coleman, that I feel like are all guys that might be in the mix here. I'm going to do these kind of rapid fire style guys, but Saluka has kind of been the favorite so far. A guy that you could say coming out of spring camp, a lot of people believe is in the driver's seat to enter fall camp. He played with the coaching staff at, I believe it was Holy Cross, and so he's one guy that a lot of people have been looking at. But Alonzo Barnett was a really, really good quarterback for them last year before he injured his knee. He just did a handful of drills, not a lot of mobility during the spring. Over the course of the summer, we've been hearing that his health is actually improving at a faster rate than a lot of us expected. We want to kind of all see exactly where is he at the start of fall camp. Is there a chance that he could push Saluka for the starting job? If not, a guy that I brought up here, Camden Coleman, he had a pretty good spring. And he is someone that is mobile like Matthew Saluka, but a better passer. He's kind of a dark horse, and I feel like his spring allowed him to work his way into the conversation, but he has a long way to go. So he's just kind of a dark horse name that I want to throw out there for all of you guys. I would say, like, if you're looking for the best well-rounded guy who has some talent, he doesn't have as much experience, but like I kind of like Coleman for being a balance of a passer, a runner, and someone who's actually fully healthy. The next competition I'm looking at here is North Texas. We have 2 guys in this one, Reese Poffenbarger and Drew Mestemaker. This is one that I believe Reese Poffenbarger is in the driver's seat. Both guys were splitting reps with the number 1 offense throughout spring camp. But every time that there were scrimmages, Poffenbarger was always the first one out there with the number 1 offense. That kind of keys me into thinking that he has the edge on Mestemaker. There's been no starter announced. This is just me reading the tea leaves so far. I've kind of said this since the end of spring camp. I feel like Poffenbarger to win this job, all he has to do is exactly what he did in spring camp. For Mestemaker to win this job, he needs Poffenbarger to play worse than he did in the spring, and Mestemaker has to play better than he did in the spring. It's still up for grabs, but this is one where I do feel a little more confident. I think Poffenbarger will most likely win this. It might be a matter of when do we find out, and that's going to be a big thing because once we know who a solid starter is, The winner of this job is going to be starting to get drafted very, very high. Next school I'm going to look at here is Ohio State. We have Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz that have been battling this, and they both started spring camp, splitting reps with the ones. I believe, I'm going to apologize because I did not look this up before recording. I believe Kienholz did take the first reps in the spring game. Sayin has kind of been the guy that most people have expected to win this job since spring camp started, but Kienholz is hanging around. I do think that's worth mentioning. Neither one of these guys brings especially Julian Sains, brings like a big rushing upside like we have seen from Ohio State quarterbacks in the past. So I am down on the fantasy prospects of the Ohio State quarterback position this year, but it is definitely worth noting that even though I'm a bit down on it, I still think it's very important to watch. There are tons of talent all over this offense, so I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on them. Another one I'm definitely be keeping an eye on is Oregon. There was not very much news that came out about this battle at all during the spring. Everybody expected Dante Moore to be the guy that came in, earned this job. No starter was announced during the spring. And because of how tight lipped it is, it's hard to say maybe who exactly is the number two. I'm throwing out the name of Austin Novosad as that potential number two. I do think some of the reasons why we just didn't get any news in the spring about this Oregon quarterback battle is the fact that coaching staffs are so worried about other teams trying to poach their talent that I think it was purposely left mysterious and waiting to make an announcement for the fall so nobody bolted in the spring transfer portal. But having said that, I cannot tell you exactly where this situation is. Kind of everyone, including myself, were expecting Dante Moore to be the guy, but I think that you have to have a lot of caution here until we start hearing news from fall camp. I'm going to view these two as about equal. I'm going to give Moore a half a step up, not even a leg up, but a half a step up on Novosad and the rest of the crew. Texas State is my last one I'm going to review here for quarterback. Brad Johnson is the current leader coming out of spring camp, but Yarnell and Holden Garner have been hanging around. And this could be another situation where no starter was announced, where they're wanting to keep everybody in the program so nobody left in the spring transfer portal. But Brad Jackson, excuse me if I said Brad Johnson earlier, I read that wrong. Brad Jackson does look like he has a leg up. If I was a betting man, I would bet he probably will win this job out. But this has always been a pretty good spot to look for quarterbacks. So I'm going to say keep your eyes out. And one thing that I really do like about Jackson over the other two guys is that he can run the ball and he adds another level of dynamic play to this quarterback position from a fantasy perspective. So a lot of us in the CFF community are rooting for Jackson to win the job just purely because of that. Switching over to running back now. These are some, I'm going to tell you right now, I had an extremely hard time picking just 5 battles to watch. I am going to probably leave out schools that you find interested in here, but these are my top 5 that I'm watching. I am going to start, of course, with Boise State. We have Sire Gaines, Malik Sherrod, and Jambre Dubar that are all in the mix here. During spring, it looked like Sherrod is going to be the guy. He's going into camp. He's going to be number 1 and likely could start the season number 1. Dubar kind of has been the default guy in this. He's kind of just always landing in last place. I'm still including his name because he's there. We don't know how much he might get rotated in. And the coaching staff has mentioned that they may utilize more 2 running back formations to get more of these guys on the field. So I do think it's still important to bring him up, but he's just kind of the default in last place guy. Sire Gaines, I don't believe played at all during the spring, not even like mobility drills on the side. But throughout the summer, there is a constant buzz coming from reporters, coming from quotes of the coaching staff, talking about how Gaines is fully healthy. He looks stronger than ever. The one thing I do remember seeing that really grabbed my eye, and since then I'm drafting him in every draft I can get my hands on. When everybody went home for 4th of July weekend, the coaches said that Gaines stayed in Boise, was working out, looking amazing. I think he is going to come in. He may not take the first reps with the number 1 offense, but I guarantee you by the time the first scrimmage is done, everyone's going to be saying, like the news we're going to be hearing is Gaines is a locked in starter, even if it hasn't been announced. I'm just willing to bet on that one right now. But this news with Gaines from over the summer has really piqued my interest, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is, where I think he is going to be the bell cow, that he is going to be that good. We've been talking about the situation all off season, but these summer reports have now given me a ton of confidence that Sire Gaines will be the man at Boise State. But I'm still going to be watching for the reports to make sure that that's going to stick. My next school is Jacksonville State, where we have Cameron Cook and Andrew Paul. So many people right now are starting to come back on the Cam Cook train for Jacksonville State. And I'm seeing his ADP rise a lot in mock drafts that I've been in. I am still viewing this as a neck and neck competition. It was that way in the spring. I am not going to change anything in my eyes about how this is going to go until I see reports from the fall. Andrew Paul is hanging around. He is not letting Cam Cook steal this job. And we saw, a lot of us just think Cam Cook transferred down from TCU. He's going to take this job, no problem. But Paul has been there. Paul is a veteran. He is a good player. And my predictions is that the likely scenario is that these two will split the carries in some degree, but one guy will definitely kind of have an edge in the carries. That's the way I have my projections right now. But I'm still going to recommend, if you want to invest in this Jacksonville State backfield, until we hear more in fall camps, handcuff both of these guys. Stop ignoring Andrew Paul or start taking him as a late round flyer because he could really pay off. Even if he's a number one running back in a split backfield, this system is definitely worth investing in. My next school here is Memphis with Gregory DesRosiers and Sutton Smith. There's been a lot of talk. Anybody that's been around college fantasy football knows this, and for those of you that are new, I'd love to educate you. You always want to invest in Memphis running backs with this current offensive system they're running. Sutton Smith has been hurt. We have not seen much from him in spring camp. That has led to DesRosiers is not easy to say. DesRosiers' value to go up a lot from the spring and so far through the summer. This is one of these situations where I am treating it as DesRosiers is the guy until I hear news that Sutton Smith is fully healthy and he is pushing for carries. That is what I'm going to be watching my eyes for. Sutton Smith is another guy I think is worth taking a late round stab at. But until we hear news that he is actually healthy and battling, I kind of have him on the back burner in my eyes. Louisiana Monroe is the fourth school I'm looking at here for running backs. We have a three-headed monster with this competition with Zach Palmer-Smith, Deshaun Ford, and Braylon McReynolds. This has been one that's been pretty debated over the course of the summer. I think after the spring, it kind of looked like Zach Palmer-Smith had the slight edge in this battle. Deshaun Ford is a super talented freshman coming in who cannot be ignored. But I kind of believe he'll be coming into fall camp like in the number 2 spot. Braylon McReynolds transferred in. He does have talent. I do not think we can ignore him as of right now. A lot of us in the CFF community are viewing as a third option, but I will be keeping my eyes peeled for news about him because he is being ignored. And if we start seeing news about him edging his way up in the competition battle, he is one of those guys that you could take a shot at with your last running back pick or your second to last running back pick in a best ball draft, and it may not be a bad idea. For right now, I'm avoiding McReynolds, and really kind of focusing on Palmer, Smith, and Ford. But I think all three of these names need to be monitored as fall camps open up here. And the last one, which is with a three-headed monster as well, is Washington State. I'm going to be looking at Kirby Voorhees, who I've just viewed as the favorite to be the starter even before spring camp started. I just felt like Kirby Voorhees has the experience in the system. He's not the typical build of a guy that they like to be the running back one, but he has played a lot. He does know the system. He has past production that can make me feel a little confident, make the coaches feel confident. But the other two names I'm really looking into here is last year's Washington State running back, Leo Pulalsi. I can never say his name right. I kind of view him as the number 2. Angel Johnson has not played much in the spring, We do not, and he's not the biggest guy either. I don't know how much of a workload he will be able to handle at Washington State. I'm putting him at the number three spot as default in this battle, purely because we haven't seen much from him and those size concerns. I think Leo is the better option and maybe the safer option for the coaches to put at that running back two. I have been investing heavily in Kirby Voorhees this summer, so that's another reason why I'm watching this. But this is a system that has shown in the past that they can have two running backs. The top two running backs have fantasy value. We'll have to see how it plays out here at the FBS level because we saw that production last year at the FCS level. But this is my last school that I'm definitely keeping an eye on for running backs. Looking over now at wide receivers, we have to start with LSU. This has been talked about all off season. The five guys that are kind of all been in the conversation is Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Barian Brown, Xavier Thomas, and Nick Anderson. This is the order I am looking at for production from these wide receivers, but there are so many question marks right now. You could be drafting the guy who you think is going to be the wide receiver two, and he may end up wide receiver four. He could end up wide receiver five. I think the best scenario is someone like Aaron Anderson, who most people are looking at as the wide receiver one. At worst, he would be wide receiver three in my eyes. I cannot see him being outside of the top three, but any of these other names, Hilton, Brown, and Nick Anderson, they could be anywhere in this pecking order by the time it's done. So I think it's definitely going to be watching how this plays out. And for me, I'm really interested to see, is Chris Hilton that guy that could actually step up and be the wide receiver one? Um, and because I do think if there's anyone who could unseat Aaron Anderson, I would bet my money on Chris Hilton. But a lot of people are high on Barry and Brown. I just kind of have Barry and Brown stuck in that wide receiver three spot, but a lot to watch at LSU. And another school where there's a lot of names to watch is Miami, Florida. I am huge on targeting the slot wide receiver in this Miami offensive system. The top two names I'm going to mention here, though, are outside guys Josiah Trader, CJ Daniels. They have been the guys being drafted first amongst these Miami wide receivers. They're not really the names I'm focusing on. The names I'm going to be watching for are all of the names that could be battling for the slot. Nathaniel Joseph and Malachi Tony were both battling out during the spring. Malachi Tony probably has the better talent advantage, but he's inexperienced. Nathaniel Joseph has been in the system, but neither one could separate from each other. Because of that, after or during the spring portal and after spring camp, the coaches went out and they signed Keelan Marion and Tony Johnson to make this a four-man race for the slot. I'm going to be having my eyes peeled on what shakes out from this Miami slot receiver position. Another one that I'm looking at a lot and I have been investing in a lot already this spring and summer is Oklahoma State. I have Jalen Lloyd as the wide receiver one purely because he looks to have the slot receiver locked down. We do have recent history where that slot receiver has been that wide receiver one in the system. But if you go further back and looking at the production in this offense, the outside receiver can be the real big fantasy stud. And there's two transfers that are going to be battling it out to see who could be the top guy on the outside. Christian Fitzpatrick and Cam Abshire. For any of you that are looking at trying to draft these guys in Fantrax, so far I have not found their names ever, which means they can be a steal with a placeholder. I really like Christian Fitzpatrick. He has a great frame. He's played at the FBS level, but Cam Abshire, I believe, is from Division II, and he's been super productive. I don't think you can count either one of these guys out. When I know who looks to be the top guy, I'm going to be going after them just as hard, and Lloyd, because they're going so cheap and you can get them at the end of drafts. So I definitely want to figure out who's going to be the top outside guy, and then I want to hear, excuse me, which wide receiver is getting the most praise over the course of fall camp. Right, right now I have Lloyd as wide receiver one, but he very easily could slide to wide receiver two if we just hear Cam Abshire, a constant, steady drumbeat of praise every time for Cam Abshire or Fitzpatrick. The next one that we should all be watching is San Jose State. Matthew Coleman stepped in during the bowl game, moved into the slot wide receiver position, which is what you want to target in the San Jose State wide receiver passing game. That is where the fantasy value is. He went into that game and went bonkers. We came into the spring, we're all expecting Coleman to be the guy, and we hear crickets. Danny Scudero is a transfer that came in, and he has played in the slot in the past. One thing, though, with this offense is it kind of doesn't matter where you've played in the past from season to season. They just put the best guy in the slot, and then everybody else fills in on the outside. So even though Scudero has played in the slot in the past, I don't put any value on that because they're going to move people how they see fit in this offense. But as some news has come out more toward the end of spring and in the summer, a name that's emerged as a possible guy who could be one of the top two playmakers in this offense is Leland Smith. And so we have a very interesting thing of changing names. Coleman's the only one that we've seen do it on the field during the season at San Jose State, but we don't know much about him. And for all we know, it could be so nobody's trying to steal Coleman. Um, Coleman might have wanted to transfer out if he wasn't going to be the guy, and he didn't transfer out during the spring. So I'm still going to say Coleman's my number one pick. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Coleman, I think, is still in the mix of this. I don't have him as the number one because of the beat writers and things that we've been hearing about Leland Smith. I am going to give him a slight advantage from these other three to be the top guy, but I'm viewing this as a wide open competition. I have to put names in order, but if I say wide open, it means people can move anywhere in my eyes. The last one is Southern Miss, the last school here. And I've been watching this one all off season. I made my case, I believe it was in early April, that when it comes to this offensive system, the wide receiver you want to target for fantasy value is an outside wide receiver who has explosive down the field playmaking ability. That is one reason why I've been planting my flag on Carl Chester all off season. He's the only outside wide receiver on this roster that has a very high yards per reception amount. Nobody else comes close. The next two best guys on this team that play on the outside are Micah Davis and Grant Page, and their yards per reception are nowhere near Chester. So I can see, for me, I view Micah Davis and Grant Page as being guys that will probably fall in as that second outside wide receiver. I personally, just faith-based here on my research, think Carl Chester is going to be the wide receiver one, but obviously I want to see some news to back that up. The slot receiver is also another area where we have more proven production, and you could say maybe a little better talent in the slot. Elijah Metcalf is someone that is the wide receiver that a lot of other people are going after and targeting in this offense. My biggest issue is he's in the slot, which always tends to hit the ceiling of about wide receiver two. And you just don't see uh, steady production over multiple years of the slot as the wide receiver one that scores high fantasy points. So I do think Elijah Metcalf, and he's going to be battling with Charlie Montgomery. I really do like Metcalf kind of coming out of the slot. I view this a little more, in my eyes, I view this competition as more settled than other people do. But it's just been by me breaking down what we see from this system over time and what you have in the different talent of these players. I personally believe Carl Chester's locked into wide receiver one. Metcalf has the edge and will likely win the slot receiver position to be the wide receiver two. And then I believe that Micah Davis will end up beating out Grant Page for the wide receiver three. But I do still, think and everybody else is going to view this as way more wide open than me, but it's definitely worth monitoring here. For the last position, I'm going to go over three tight end battles that I'm going to be watching intently. I'm going to start with Michigan. Marlon Klein and Hogan Hansen are two guys that looked to be splitting reps during the spring. Klein has been the one running with the first team offense, mainly because he's an older guy. He has more veteran experience, probably also because he's a little better in the blocking game. While Hogan Hansen, the younger, more athletic, and better receiving tight end, he wasn't able to do enough to separate from Klein. From a talent perspective, I would rather have Hansen, but as long as Klein is hanging around and continuing to run with the ones, I think that this does have the potential to be a split production situation where both guys are seeing the field and it nukes the fantasy value here for the tight end position at Michigan. Um, so the biggest thing I'm going to be watching from a fantasy perspective is that Hansen is getting praise. We start seeing more news about him going out first with the first team offense. And if we're not seeing that, if we're not hearing those things, it will tell us by default Klein is still just hanging around with the first team. Another one that I'm going to be watching that we have some news from, but I know where I really want to place my chips to invest in this is Middle Tennessee. Hunter Tipton is the default number one guy coming out of fall camp. One big part of it is he was healthy, but he didn't have a bad spring game. He ran with the ones the majority of the time. He's not the most talented guy, though. But he does have a little more experience here, which could help him with hanging on to the number one job. But the guy that has the best ability to be a Tino, a tight end in name only, is Tavon Galloway. He is a transfer from Purdue, I believe. He has the physical makeup of a guy that I believe he has all 4 years of eligibility. If Middle Tennessee can keep him from leaving in the transfer portal. But he is a guy who can play flexed out in the slot. He's athletic. He's still needing to put on weight and become a better blocker. But when we're looking at fantasy value, he's a guy that they might just use as their wide receiver 3 and have Tipton in tight blocking. But Galloway was hurt for a lot of spring camp, so we don't know quite yet how impactful he's going to be, and he could just come in and blow away this competition. And that's really what I'm going to be looking for. Evan Poticher, I'm probably saying it right or incorrectly. Evan Poticher, he's another guy. He's a name to keep in mind. I believe he was dinged up a bit as well. We don't have much more to go on for Middle Tennessee at the tight end position besides Tipton was healthy. Tipton started the spring game, and I believe he had one touchdown in that game. But I believe Galloway's the guy who could just run away with this competition. I want to see does he enter fall camp healthy, and is he just making plays right and left like I expect him to do with his athletic ability? And the last one is TCU, which I've invested in heavily this offseason. DeAndre Rogers is kind of the de facto tight end one going into fall camp, just like I mentioned with Tennessee, with Middle Tennessee, is mainly been because he was healthy during the spring. Kamorian Pipton is a transfer from LSU who has tons of athletic ability, can play in the slot. He's the guy I think is best suited to be a fantasy stud at TCU, but he was injured and banged up in the spring. So I want to see, is he going to come to fall camp healthy? Is he making a bunch of plays? Is he running more reps with the number ones in the scrimmages? The TCU, and I haven't invested much on Middle Tennessee because there's too many question marks there, and there's too many guys. I've been investing in TCU because I can handcuff that and guarantee I get whoever the starter is. But Middle Tennessee and TCU, I think there are guys there in Galloway and Pipton who could be fantasy studs this year. We just don't have enough confirmation at this time, which is why people are avoiding them. I'm going to go over now to mailbag time. And we are running a little long here. I am going to make this quick. It is only one question, but it is a long answer. So I want to try and give you my detailed information, but we're running a little long already on the show here. But mailbag time is where I answer your submitted questions. I throw out threads both on X and on Substack chat where you can submit your questions to me. We have just one here, but it is a great question from J Theme on Substack. And he asks, how do you weigh system versus player performance in your projections? An example, using Jalen Lloyd for that example here, he's in a highly productive system, but very little performance data on him or his QB. How do I factor that in? And the first thing I'll say is I do factor both of these things in. I do want to sit here and say that I view it like a juggling act. It's a little different every time, or every different type of thing you're juggling, whether you're juggling a tennis ball, knives, bowling pins. Um, I allow myself to be flexible with each different situation. I always start with system first, and then I go talent second, talent slash production second. So I'm always going to look within what do I see in the historical context um, of these offensive systems, and I will then also start to look at, when I'm looking at things from a high level, is how do I just my general feeling about the offense as a whole, or a position group as a whole. So an example could be, let's say you have a brand new quarterback, you have all, like a bunch of wide receivers graduated or went to the NFL, so the passing game is it's going to be very green, but you have an experienced starting running back coming back. I'm going to take that into account and look, when I'm looking at the historical data, and look for years where were they running the ball more than other years? What were the workloads of these different positions? And that's where I start always with the systems. I look at the workloads, and I'll make that assessment along with just how do I view the general picture for a school. So I mentioned Jacksonville State, their running back competition. When I viewed that position and I looked at the situation I see with Cook and Paul, I said, right now, I don't see a guy that has stood out to be a workhorse back, which there is a lot of in that system. So I instead looked at, what years did they start to split carries? What did that split carry distribution look like? And the other thing that I do to try and make things a little bit easier to break down is I do everything from a per game basis. Um, and then even from that, I will do other stats from a per workload basis. So an example with running back, I'm going to start with carries per game. So I look at the system to start with that, but then the talent and production comes into play with Jacksonville State, where I decided I'm going to make this more of a split carry backfield. I'm not going to anoint someone right now to be a workhorse. So I split up the carries the way I kind of view it that way from what I see in the system and on my read of the talent. And then from there, I will take the pass production into play with both running backs, and I will apply what we know of their yards per carry for me to start to come up with yardage. So I figured out their workload. Now I'm going to look at yards per carry. I'm going to look at what have they shown in their career that they do. I'll compare that to what I see in this system, because obviously, like, yards per carry of a running back in an option system is not going to be the same in other systems. So I'll kind of compare it to the range of yards per carry I see in the historical data from the system. If it's in line and looks like it's a normal number in that data range, I'll just go with the guy's yards per carry. I might think maybe a guy's going to improve. I might give him a little bump up in his yards per carry. Maybe the guy's yards per carry is way higher than anything I've ever seen in a system. I'll tap it down a bit. So I fiddle, and that's what I mean by the juggling. I kind of fiddle each situation, each team. There's no black or white way I can kind of say it. But I kind of go through that process, and it really, like with a running back, it really will come down to, when we talk about the rushing thing, I'm going to look at what's the workload. I'm going to figure out carries per game. Then I'm going to figure out yards per carry. That's going to give me the rushing yards, and then I do touchdowns by carry. Is the way that I like to break things down, and then I'll figure out that number, which will get me to touchdowns per game, and then touchdowns per season when you take it out over 12 games. So I kind of do that process with everything. But like I said, I do system first just because when you look at systems over a long amount of time, you see changes in different talent and player production, but then you can also see those ranges. And if you're just thinking, like, I'm not sure if this guy is as good as what I've seen from other, let's use Jalen Lloyd, Oklahoma State. I don't know if he's as talented as what I've seen from all these other guys, what I've seen the last 3 years at Oklahoma State. I can also then take his productivity stats, like his I do yards per target, not reception, but yards per target. I'll take that and I'll bat that down a little bit to be conservative with it, instead of going with what I've seen for the last 3 years, or I might just go with what I have of the average of every year, or I might remove an outlier season where I see a consistent thing of I'm just going to make up a stat, 5.5 to 4.5 yards per target. I'm making up these numbers right now, guys, but and I kind of see that range over and over, except for maybe in one year I saw one guy have 7 yards. I may just ignore that 7 yards and then work out the average with that pulled out. So there's a lot of different ways I kind of get to that. But the thing I really want to do is when you don't have a lot of past production, which is what your question really was getting to here, Jay, is that when I don't know a lot, I will kind of just filter down to the averages. If this is just the average thing that I've seen, what I believe is just the normal middle of the road for a system, plus some specific player stats like their yards per target, their yards per carry, their yards per pass attempt. I'll kind of blend those all in and just work from the middle. Or if I just think the team is going to be bad overall, I may just kind of push them down a little lower below the middle point. So a lot of different factors come into play with your question here. Like I said, I don't have a black and white answer for you, but I really kind of go from that detailed thing from a small level, and then I work my way up to the larger numbers that I give you guys with the projections. I'm going to wrap up the show here because we are 11 minutes long, but I only have one announcement to make, so this will be quick. Please check out my 2025 CFF Draft Guide. All premium subscribers get my draft guide for free. If you are not a premium subscriber, I would love to have you as one. And part of the way I like to show you my thanks is you will get this for free. If you are not interested in being a premium subscriber, if you want to be a free subscriber, I'd still love to have you. I have a way where you can still get this draft guide. It is $15 for all non-premium subscribers. Premium subscribers do not have to pay this. And as I do updates, as spring camp comes out, which I will be doing over August, I will be updating my player rankings. I will be updating my projections. Whether you're a premium subscriber and you come to the website or whether you purchased it for $15, I will have updated drafts for this draft guide. So any of you that have already purchased it or downloaded it, you'll see that updated date on the lower left-hand corner. When I do a new update, I'm going to have it on there. And if you purchased it for $15, you do not have to purchase it again. I will have an updated version where you will be able to go in and download that updated version with your login credentials that showed you already purchased that product. This draft guide has 76 pages of CFF info. I have player rankings for all FBS, Power 4 with a half PPR for Underdog Fantasy. The Scott Fish Tadpole Bowls are wrapping up here, but just in case you're looking for some last minute help, you're struggling in the later rounds, I've got the Scott Fish Tadpole Bowls in there. I also have just group of 5 player rankings. I also offer you player ranking upload files that you can take into your Fantrax leagues, and it'll automatically upload those for you so you don't have to go through and pre-rank them all. I also provide player projections for 974 players. That number will fluctuate here as I do updates. I do want to mention that. But you're going to get roughly around that real similar number here. This is the next big thing in college fantasy football. Draft guides. I'm really proud to be presenting this to you guys, and I'm really thankful for hearing all the positive feedback from people who have been using this, that has been really helping them out in their fantasy drafts so far. So I want to say this has been the Fantasy Rain Rundown. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you for joining the Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF Rain starts here.